Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live. Today, I will be talking all about Snow White. So, we're going to be covering Snow White, my review. I went to the cinema, I watched it on Friday evening, and I have some thoughts. So, I'm going to be sharing a review. I'm also going to get into the differences between the 1937 movie. So, that was the original Snow White movie. We're going to get into the differences between that movie and the new 2025 action remake, as they call it. I'm also going to discuss some of the controversies surrounding the making of Snow White. Because over the weekend, it has been bombed with absolutely negative reviews. There are lots of negative reviews out there. I was very curious about it. So, of course, I did a deep dive and we're going to get into the controversy. So, we're covering three major things here today. I will be sharing my review. I will be getting into the differences between this new remake and the original 1937 movie. I will be doing a separate video to talk about the differences in the Grimm's story. I will lightly mention it here, but I will do a dedicated video on that one. And like I said, we'll get into all the controversies surrounding Snow White. Okay. So I want to get into my review first and foremost, okay? If you're watching live, let me know your thoughts in the comments about Snow White. Have you watched it? Are you planning to watch it? Just let me know your thoughts on it. Have you seen any of the controversy online? Again, I'd love to hear from you. But again, I'm just going to kick things off with a review. Okay. So I went to the cinema on Friday the 21st, to watch Snow White 2025. And I have to tell you, it is a mixed bag. Okay, this is not exactly a blockbuster. It's amazing, but it's also not a disaster either. So I'm going to break down my thoughts into some themes. Now, I think they were really trying to do something bold, something big, a huge reimagining, repurposing that IP. But I think it kind of fell short. Now, Disney, for context, went all out on this remake. They reimagined the classic in this modern live action style in a new way. They casted Rachel Zegler to be Snow White, and there was a huge budget behind it. But here's the thing, despite all the flashy visuals, despite the star power that they decided to bring, despite all the extensive production efforts, the film really didn't hit all the marks for me. It hit some, but to some degree, I felt like the story was trying too hard to be very progressive, as opposed to focusing more on the nostalgia. So that's where I felt like it lost some of the balance. So we need that nostalgia, and you can make it modern, but they didn't do a good job balancing the two. So as a result, it wasn't a big win for me. Now, what we get is an adequate movie. It's perfectly adequate. It has moments that are great, but it really doesn't give us that spark of excitement that really delivers the emotional punch that we expect from this movie, and also just Disney remakes in general. Now, I have to say, all the controversies surrounding the movie was a huge distraction. Because again, I was just very, very confused that even before people watched the movie, there was lots of negative things being said about it. I had posted a short. So if you're watching on YouTube Shorts, I shared a short sharing my quick take. I posted that also on TikTok, and immediately people are saying, this is going to be a flop. This is not good. Snow White is too woke, and just a whole list of things. So again, we're going to get into all the controversy. So I will have a separate video on that. If you're watching live, just continue watching. I will discuss this. One of the main things was the casting. So selecting Rachel Zegler as Snow White seemed to be a big problem. There is a trend online where people are saying Snow woke and Snow White is not white. So this has sparked a lot of fierce online debates. There is also another debacle in terms of the dwarves that were used. Okay, we have CGI dwarves. That was also another point of contention as well. So there were lots of things happening. So unfortunately, I feel the controversies are overshadowing the film. Okay. So instead of focusing on let's watch the movie, clear our minds and just approach it as is, I think all the controversies is overshadowing the film itself. And unfortunately, the drama off screen is pulling away from what the film, I feel, was trying to accomplish. So, yes, watching the film, you might get some of those feelings from the classic. However, I think sometimes the negative chatter is going to make you watch the movie with a certain point of view. And you, too, as a viewer, will be distracted. And as a result, you might find the film underwhelming. Okay. Now, we also have to talk about the behind the scenes with this movie because, again, as I've been digging, and now it has to be a part of my review, is just lots of production pains. Now, I have discovered that it had a lot of production setbacks from pandemic delays. There was a fire on set. They had to do some reshoots because of things with actors and health problems. And also, to be quite fair, I think some backlash online. They were reading some of the reviews or some of the memes and deciding, hey, I have an opinion on this. However, again, I want to just say on a film level, I got some charming elements. I got some nostalgic elements. I know the narrative is not the same. It might not completely captivate you, but for me, it really did a fair job there. So overall, kind of wrapping things up with my review, I will say Snow White was trying. Snow White 2025 was trying to give us those modern sensibilities with a nostalgic look back on the show we know and love. Because look, it's a classic fairy tale. So it's trying to bring us back to our childhoods when odds are that's when most of us interacted with Snow White for the first time. However, it was caught up between, trying to do this progressive messaging, but also keeping the traditional charm. And in a way, it just resulted in blah. So it wasn't good, in my opinion, but it wasn't bad. Snow White for me was just okay. I personally really, really enjoyed the Evil Queen. Okay. I thought the Evil Queen was fierce. I thought she was giving. I mean, I was here for it. I also love seeing the mirror, mirror on the wall, this new modern version of the mirror. I do have thoughts on the dwarves, and I will be talking more about that in the controversies as it relates to Snow White. But I loved also seeing the kingdom. Again, I'll be talking more about some of the differences between the original 1937 film and the present 2025 one. But overall, again, look, can we just forget everything that folks are saying online and just approach the movie with fresh eyes? I think that is the best way. It does give you political vibes, okay? There are political themes. Part of me is wondering, is this a metaphor for our current times? Again, I'd love for you to watch it and let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're watching live, I'd love to hear from you. So share your thoughts in the comments. But also, replay crew, I'd love to hear from you as well. So share your thoughts again in the comments. All right, so let's get into the controversies, shall we? I think it's worthy to kind of get into some of the controversies surrounding Snow White. Now, as it relates to controversies, a lot of things revolve around the original film. Now, the original Snow White film was in 1937. If you're watching, I have the poster up. And I think folks are comparing the two a lot. So we're going to get into some of the controversies and then I'll get into some of the differences. Let me know how that sounds. But I think I have to talk about the controversies. Then we get into the differences. But if you're just watching me live, I am sharing my thoughts on Snow White 2025. I shared my review. So the review has been shared. Now we're going to get into the controversies surrounding the film, and then we'll get into the differences between the 2025 version and the 1937 version. All right. Again, if you're watching live, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Replay crew, we would love to hear from you as well. Okay, so Disney's 2025 live action remake of Snow White has been a roller coaster ride. That was the first thing I wrote in my notes. It's an absolute roller coaster ride. There's lots of controversy surrounding it, and we're going to dissect each and we're going to kind of go through little by little. Granted, I kind of clustered some of them because there's just so many drama, from the casting drama to the behind the scenes drama. I'm going to break it all down with you here today. Now, the biggest one has to be the casting drama. So, casted as Snow White is Rachel Zegler. Now, Rachel Zegler is a Latina actress who is stepping into a role that is traditionally associated with whiteness. Okay. Online trolls, pundits, people with an opinion immediately went after this choice. I think this was the first major choice that they wanted to attack, is who was casted for the show. As a result, it sparked an online debate and hashtags like Snow Woke, Snow White isn't white, and all these different things. However, despite the backlash, Disney and studio execs proudly went along with this. They defended their choice for the casting. They argued that Zegler's voice and screen presence was just exactly what they were looking for to modernize the story. They didn't see her ethnicity as a negative. Actually, they saw it as, you know what, this is perfectly fine. Why can't she play Snow White? So they went along and decided, we're going to work with this actress. We're not going to make changes just because she's a Latina. She's fit for the role. She embodies it well. And they think she'd do a good job at doing this remake for this classic tale. So that is the first major negative things folks are saying about Snow White. The next big thing that I think is worth mentioning is, of course, the seven dwarves. Now, I have the seven dwarves on screen, and these are CGI dwarves, okay? So here's the thing. In Disney's original animated film, right, the seven dwarves, they were, drawn. They were drawn. We had the remake. However, for this new one, for 2025, there was lots of online scrutiny because, first of all, so this is the first thing. You have to get the backstory. I tried to find a picture of the bandits online from the Snow White movie, the 2025. I couldn't find anything that I could share with you here today. But what you need to know is there was a leak on set that emerged showing like these groups of bandits instead of the traditional dwarves. Now, people thought, oh my gosh, is this what they're going to do to replace the dwarves? Instead, Disney was very going about it in a roundabout way. What we found out is that most of the dwarves would be CGI, and then Disney was adding a group of bandits. So we have our seven dwarves who are CGI dwarves, but also added to the story is a group of bandits, and they're also a group of seven. So that is also another dilemma. Now, here's the thing. Fans and folks from the dwarfism community were outraged. They were actually accusing Disney of just completely erasing them, erasing their identity, and just dehumanizing dwarf people, because we do have dwarf people. They are a whole community. There were folks, I forgot the actor's name, who was saying, I was a maid to play Dopey, So there were folks in the dwarf community who was like, hey, cast to me. Because also it is very hard for folks in the dwarf community to get casted and to get work. So there was a lot of outrage as it relates to the dwarfs and them going in a CGI direction. Now, Disney scrambled, of course. They had to put out a statement, and they were saying that they actually hired dwarfs as consultants. So they hired folks from the dwarf community as consultants, and that the bandits were a separate group. Because like I said, there were pictures of the bandits that were leaked, and people were thinking, oh my gosh, are they completely taking away the seven dwarfs and giving us this? Anyway, they tried to assure us that the CGI dwarfs would be respectfully rendered, but I have to say the controversy just still raged online, fueling lots of negative reviews and heated debates. So that was another big controversy surrounding the remake of 2025 Snow White. Another controversy, which now what you're seeing on the picture is an improvement. Believe it or not, the wig and just the visual vibes was a whole thing online. So Rachel Zegler's hairstyle, so Rachel Zegler playing Snow White, it became an instant meme. Okay. Critics, fans, just everyone was saying her hair looks like a helmet kind of vibe and it looks very cartoonish and it is actually feeding into outdated stereotypes and just compromising the overall film's aesthetic and wanting to be modern. So, what did Disney do? They did some digital fixes to try and balance something more modern, but again, to give us the nostalgic vibes. So let me go back and show you 1937 Snow White. So that is 1937 Snow White with the hair, okay? And then this is a modern remake of Snow White with the hair. So there you have it. But believe it or not, the wig was a meme. Now, another controversy is the production pitfalls. Now, there was lots of drama, okay, happening on screen, production, and off stage. It was a lot. So it's very important to know that production wasn't smooth sailing. It was, during the time of the pandemic, outbreaks, force safety protocols. It added so much more money to the budget. They even had a fire on set. They had soundstage problems. It's just a lot of things that were happening. We also had the 2023 actors strike that hit, which halted reshooting. There is also lots of things people were saying as it relates to Rachel Zegler being cast as Snow White. We had the evil queen, Gal Gadot, be having some health problems as well. So there was just a lot of things happening that delayed the work. So, of course, this forced Disney to scramble and trying to pull things together, even though they were already over budget. Now, folks were saying this would make the movie go to streaming. But again, Disney has proceeded with a theatrical release. And again, I watched the movie on Friday and I shared my review. So if you're just joining the live, just hit rewind. If you're watching the replay, you've probably heard it already, or you can watch a dedicated video because I will be posting my review separately. So that was just some of the production pitfalls, but wait for it. The social media pitfalls were absolutely the worst. So some of the social media pitfalls involved or Snow White character, Rachel Zegler. Now, Rachel Zegler was very outspoken on social media, and as a result, it played a huge role in a lot of the controversy surrounding the movie. Now, she had shared the trailer on X, formerly Twitter. She had made some political statements on her platform. She shared the trailer, and then she also said, "And always remember free Palestine." Now, again, this is her opinion. But she did so when she shared the trailer. And unfortunately, that ignited a firestorm of just people being very divided. They're saying, why are you bringing politics into this? Like, this should be a movie. Here's the thing. Art is inherently political. I know a lot of people don't agree with it, but look, it's facts. Art is inherently political. The movie itself has political themes and tones, which is something I shared in my review. But again, art is political. But anyway, it railed up folks online. It was very divisive. It polarized audiences. It did. It also sparked a rift with her co-star, the evil queen, Gal Gadot. I think that's how her name is said. It also led to calls from pundits saying that she needs to be replaced. We can't have this Snow White, Rachel Zegler playing Snow White. They wanted her replaced. And of course, she came out with an apology. However, the apology really didn't do much to quell the outrage. So yeah, it's been a lot. And again, having the two main characters, the evil queen and Snow White, just, essentially creating a rift between them, that just was not the move, unfortunately. And here we go. This is where we have now a conversation on how a person's personal views, because here's the thing, everyone should be entitled to their own personal view, But when you share it during, the lead up to the movie release, or even when you're on press, it can really overshadow the film's reception. So this is where we have questions on where is the line between personal and professional. And as we evolve as a society, we're recognizing that line is becoming more and more non-existent. And, to some degree for good reason, but also, again, how can we have our work life and our personal life separate? That was a big question that was coming out as a result of this. And now it's the Monday after opening. So, like I said, someone said on my TikTok, this is going to flop. So here we are, the box office. Now, I tried to get some numbers on the box office before I came here live, but needless to say, this probably won't be a big box office hit. It's actually been very slow from what I've been seeing and hearing. Again, I don't have official numbers. I don't know, but folks are being very cautious about ticket sales. They are saying they're planning for lower than Disney's usual mark for ticket sales when it comes to remakes. And they're saying it has a lot to do with all the controversies, the behind the scenes chaos, and just everything that is leaving folks very hesitant to actually go out and watch Snow White. But if you're watching live, let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you're watching the replay crew, I'd love to hear from you as well. I mean, what do you think now that you know most, because this isn't all, but most of the controversies surrounding Snow White? Are you planning to watch Snow White 2025? What are your thoughts and feelings? Again, I'd love to hear from you. So share your thoughts in the comments. Okay, I'm going to take a coffee sip for a minute before we get into the differences, because I do want to talk about the differences between the Snow White 2025 and then the 1937 version. I really do want to get into that. I will be doing a separate video on the Grimm's Fairytale. Here it is. It's right next to me. I'll do a separate one on the Grimm's Fairytale. I mean, I'll high level mention some of it, but I think I'll do a separate video dedicated to it. I have been live a lot today, everyone. In case you haven't realized, we had breaking news with a whole author and a whole separate video. So it's been a lot. And I want to do the Grimm's Fairytale differences justice. So just be patient with me. It is coming. It will come this week. We're not doing it in this live really heavy, but I will mention some of it, like I said. Okay. Whew, one more coffee sip and we'll get into the differences. All right. Okay. Whew, all right. So let's get into some of the differences. And I've listed quite a few. I've listed about a dozen. Okay. I've listed about a dozen differences. And again, we're comparing the two. So let's get into it. Okay, so I have some notes on Disney's live action Snow White 2025 retake. I have some thoughts on what is different between the 2025 version, but also the original 1937 version. Now, I have found online the 1937 version is extremely beloved, and folks have a lot of thoughts and opinions on how the new version has reinterpreted the original, but also how it is completely different. Okay, so the very first thing I noticed was the backstory was completely revised. Okay, now in the original Snow White was called Snow White because her complexion was as white as snow, right? Now, as a reader, I'm interpreting that as symbolizing purity and innocence, okay? Now, in the new Snow White version, however, we get a completely new backstory. Her origin is reimagined. We see her actually being born on a stormy, stormy night, very restless, just relentless. And I think her being named Snow White also during that time is now adding depth to her character, but also because she was born into a very turbulent, stormy night, it is adding a sense of destiny right from the start. Like she was meant to be here despite, just everything that was happening. We also see, and I think this is very important to remember. So, this is going to be my second point. We see Snow White's parents having a huge role in her origin story. Whereas in the original, we really don't get that much from her parents. You know what I mean? Like, her parents are neither here nor there to her story. But in this one, we see her parents teaching her lots of, values and importance and kind of prepping her to become queen and ruling the kingdom. So that was quite opposite, having her parents having a huge role in her backstory. So that one was a big one. Another thing that they did in the new remake is that we had a lot of new songs, okay? Some new songs include Waiting on a Wish, Princess Problems, which I found very funny and interesting. The Princess Problems, it kind of took me back to Wicked, but that's a whole separate story. Watch my Wicked review if you haven't already. We also have another song entitled Good Things Grow and All Is Fair. There's just lots and lots and lots of new songs. But I want to point out a song that was in the original Snow White that was completely removed from the 2025 remake. Now, the iconic song, Someday My Prince Will Come, that really just kind of defines Snow White, just simple, just a girl longing for her Prince Charming to come and all that good stuff. In this one, it is completely different. In the remake, we get a whole different version. We get a song where instead she is empowered. She already has all the qualities she is wishing for. She doesn't need it in a prince. So instead of needing that external rescue from a prince, no, she has all the power she needs. It's definitely more self-empowering. So that was also very interesting. So Someday My Prince Will Come is not in this one. That was in the original. So you don't have Someday My Prince Will Come. They completely erased that because it would be irrelevant. And also I'm Wishing, that I'm Wishing song, that is completely gone. That's where she's talking about, what her heart desires the most and all these different things. So there are lots of new songs in the new version, but also iconic songs from the original have been removed. I think they were going for, female empowerment, more feminism themes for a modern storytelling. So, the girl isn't waiting on a prince to save her. So that is another major change. Now, again, the dwarf dilemma. Now, I mentioned this in the controversies, but it's also noteworthy to mention that this is a big change in the new 2025 version, because in the 1937 film, the dwarfs are charming. They're hand-drawn. It has a little bit more of a, I don't know, a magical touch, just something about them. And they have this warm appeal, definitely more cartoonish, no question about it. However, in the 2025 version, we have CGI dwarfs that I talked about in the controversy. So check that out. If you're watching this, you probably heard it already. Replay crew, just go back. But they're just very different. The dwarfs don't really seem warm to me. They're just more like mechanical, just functional. They're just not as endearing, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's, the CGI dwarfs or what. Or maybe it has to do with the distraction that we have with the new woodland bandits, because that's another change. Okay, I don't have a picture of the bandits to share with you. However, that is a major change. So in this one, we have 7 bandits alongside 7 dwarfs. So they added the whole bandits thing as well. Another thing worth mentioning is the prince. The prince is also completely reimagined. The prince is not a prince in the original. So in the original, we have the Snow White, remember, waiting for the prince. The prince kisses Snow White and all is, the curse is broken and all is well. Okay, this time, the prince in this version of Snow White is a bandit. So we swapped out a prince from a faraway land who came around. We have a bandit. Now, this prince, his name is Jonathan. He gives Robin Hood vibes, okay? Definitely, you rob from the rich, feed the, anyway. So he has a central role. He does rescue Snow White in, little ways, in a more action-packed way, I should say. And this gives us more a modern romance vibe. So that is a big difference. But again, he's not a prince, he's a bandit. So there's something to be said there. Now, going back to the dwarfs, I want to bring your attention to Dopey because this is another difference. In the animated classic, Dopey is silent. Dopey doesn't talk. Dopey is that comic relief character, right? So even though he doesn't speak, he does these little things that add lightness and levity. However, in the new film, Dopey has a voice, okay? Dopey talks. Dopey even ends up narrating parts of the story, but you might not realize Dopey's narrating parts of the story, and that is fine. However, I will tell you, when I was at the cinema, I had like 2 chairs, I think it was, between me, but there was a family there. There was a little girl, so the little girl was closest to me, and I heard her audibly say, ah, "Dopey talked." You know what I mean? Like I could tell the shock on her because she verbally said Dopey talked, with her surprise in her voice. So yeah, Dopey talked. So that is definitely something different. And I love the unexpected layer of personality to Dopey. That, I will say, was a welcome change. And clearly to the little girl sitting next to me, she was very surprised. I really can't stress that enough. But we got an added layer to a character we thought we already knew. So that was a change, in my opinion, I thought was very, very, very welcome. So yeah, I was here for Dopey talking, and clearly so was the little girl. Another change I want to mention is the fact we don't have a glass coffin. So, in the original Snow White, in the 1937 version, we have like a glass coffin that Snow White is in. We don't really have that. It kind of looked like a floral tent to me. I mean, if you've watched it, let me know your thoughts in the comments, but we get like this floral tent vibes. So that was very interesting. I think the coffin is iconic. It's etched in our memory. So I don't understand why they made the change. Instead, she's placed on like this big rock, and it's like an open tent thing. There's dangling flowers. Again, you let me know your take. I mean, it can be seen as a soft, subtle shift instead of giving us, the fairy tale aesthetic. I don't know. Maybe they're trying something new. But again, let me know your thoughts. Another big thing is there's a song, Whistle While You Work, and, you have all the dwarfs kind of singing along as Snow White is kind of singing along. Now, here's the thing. The original number, it's very light, but in the 1937 version, it's when Snow White is cleaning up the cottage, right? Because going back to the original Grimm's Tale as well, Snow White and the dwarfs kind of bartered. They're like, yeah, sure, you can stay here. And she's cooking and cleaning, and she's fine to stay there. So while Snow White is cleaning, we have that, Whistle While You Work kind of song. They completely redid that in the new version. So did we get the traditional lyrics that we know and love in the new version? Yes, but they also kind of amped it up as well. We had some new verses and a new vibe. The dwarfs, again, they were able to show more personality and more camaraderie and all of that. So, that was very, very interesting. Another twist is the fate of the evil queen. And I'm sorry, I said on TikTok, I think Gal Gadot, I think that's her name, I'm not sure, but the evil queen was fierce. I love the looks. Like, the looks were looking, it was giving, in my opinion. I liked it. But anyway, we have a very interesting end to the evil queen. So the evil queen has a new fate. Now, in the 1937 version, the queen has a downfall. It's very dramatic. She's being chased, and, she ends up falling off a cliff and stuff, and lightning. And don't quote me, my memory isn't perfect, but I know it was more dramatic, the ending. However, the remake offers a whole new twist, completely new twist. I mean, I went to the cinema with my husband, and he was not very happy with the ending. Yeah, he just, he had thoughts about the ending. But anyway, the evil queen's fate. So the ending is different, but the evil queen's fate was also very interesting. Instead, we see the mirror right? The Evil Queen asking the mirror, like, who's the fairest and all of that stuff. And of course, the mirror tells her Snow White, and she smashes the mirror, and then the mirror disintegrates. And in an odd way, like, she disintegrates too. So the way the queen ended, that was very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I also want to mention the ending, the actual ending itself, right? With Snow White basically saying, I remember, I remember, I remember. I don't want to spoil it for folks who haven't seen it yet, although to be fair, this differences is all about spoilers because I'm saying what's different between the 1937 version and the new 2025 version. I have mixed thoughts about the ending. I don't know. I would have loved to be in the writing room and saying, okay, what are the other options we have for endings? Because that's one thing I know with like screenwriters and stuff like that. Like, you never just have one ending. I would love to know what the alternate was. I don't think the ending stuck the landing. So the way they ended it, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Anyways, what else is going on? Oh, in my notes, I also have another major difference is the dwarves in the original version, in the 1937 version. We have like a dwarves bathing scene and them just being all up to antics as well. We don't have that. There's also like a whimsical song. I can't remember the name of the song, but you know, it's just a very playful thing. This is completely removed from the remake. Again, I think they're moving away from just the animated version into a more streamlined movie narrative. Another thing worth mentioning, especially for people who, you know Snow White baking and making pies and stuff like that. Listen, Snow White in the classic version, she's seen making all these pies, and you know, she has the dwarves' names and doing all these little quaint things, right? We don't get that. The new film removes it completely. We don't have those sentimental kitchen scenes. Instead, it is focusing, I feel, on just like the broader story. So we really, we really don't get that as well. So I think that was another like major difference. We also had some dwarf songs that were expanded. The hey ho, that song that was as they're going into the mines, it expanded on it. It was still there. It was more humorous. I like the new version of the song. That was kind of, fun and modern and whimsical. So yeah, I think that was a welcome and okay change. But anyways, I know I've been going on and on and on, but those are the major changes. I think I shared 13 changes, maybe, who knows? But there are lots of differences between the 1937 version of Snow White, okay? Lots of differences between this version and the new 2025 live action remake. Again, if you are planning to watch Snow White, if you're going to wait for it to come to streaming, if you've already seen it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So just let me know in the comments. I think it had a tug of war thing going on. The more I'm sitting with it, because I went to the cinema and I saw it on Friday, and today is Monday, the more I'm sitting with it, I think they were trying to give us those traditional whimsical elements, but also making it modern. And it was like a tug of war at times, so you have one moment I thought it was good, then another moment I was like, and it was just going back and forth, back and forth. But it is difficult, I feel, to sometimes reimagine these timeless stories. I'd love to also know your thoughts on, should Disney let it go? I've noticed there's a rise of remakes. Do you think remakes will always be made? Should they be continued to be made? Should there be a point when we're like, okay, let's call this quits? There are lots of questions surrounding this. So again, I would love to know your thoughts. So if you're watching live, let me know in the chat. Replay crew would love to hear from you as well. So share your thoughts in the comments.